Hello and welcome to the B to 3 Squad podcast. Hi guys, my name is Liran and I am a pediatric speech-language pathologist. The B to 3 Squad is a video podcast that was created for families and for those who support the development of children from birth to 3 years of age. What should you expect from this podcast? Well, in each episode, we'll explore topics that occupy us as parents or as service providers, focusing on how they relate to children's early development. The discussions will be carried out by yours truly and other experts who frequently work with this age group. The discussions are meant to address common questions, offer practical tools that anyone can utilize, and mostly just raise awareness. So if you are a parent or a professional or someone who is simply looking to learn more about the birth to 3 age group, this podcast is for you. And today on the squad, I have the pleasure of introducing Emily. Emily is a child developmental specialist with over 25 years of experience working with children under the age of 3. Hi, yes. Emily.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Excited. Emily is also the proud parent of 2 boys, so lots of personal experience as well.
A lot.
Right. Today on the podcast, our first topic of discussion is going to be related to resources, related to development. We do want to talk about what are the options for parents who have questions about their child's development. Some of it would be things that you probably know about, and some of it might be new information. So we are going to dive into that. We also kind of refer to this topic as the referral process or the self-referral process. We do want to differentiate between the two. Referral might be dependent on a doctor, your pediatrician, and they are our go-to source when we have questions about development. But there is also the option of self-referral. If I have questions about my child's development and I do want to go directly to the professional, I certainly have the right to do so. And that's where we're going to kind of look into what are the options, more so relevant to people who live in the U.S., but lots of countries have equivalent services or similar services. So, the takeaway from today would be know what's available to you. So we're going to start with our first topic or question related to self-referral. Emily, what do you think is the biggest misconception that we also often hear from parents when we talk about self-referral?
I think one of the biggest myths, those misconceptions out there, is that the information once they go seek help is that they're stuck in some database. Their child will be labeled in a database that will follow them along school. And I think that is a tough thing to think about when you're just worried about your little one. You just want to get help for them. You want to ask questions. And here you are worried about, your 1-year-old, your 2-year-old, your baby, and thinking, is this going to follow them? Is this going to follow them to kindergarten? Is this going to follow them along the way? And really, the truth is, it's not. This is just getting them early help, right. Whoever you choose to go to,
right,
and whatever you choose to do.
Right. So that's kind of taking us to that topic of confidentiality. Under HIPAA laws, any type of developmental evaluation is considered medical information. And that's something that nobody can take a look at without your consent.
Yeah, it is yours to do with. You can choose to share it. You can choose to hold on to it. You can share it with whoever you choose to share it with.
Right. Right. And we also have to kind of remember that we are talking about early childhood development.
Yes.
And, some parents, before my child can walk or talk or even eat solid foods, they're already worried about getting into that Ivy League college and whether or not this developmental intervention service would get in the way of my child being a super successful human being.
And sometimes I feel like the biggest myth is worrying about a diagnosis. Is whoever I'm going to see or come to my home, are they going to provide me a diagnosis? And some of the diagnoses they're looking for are not things that are even diagnosed at such an early age. So I think sometimes, those questions of, do they have ADHD because they have a lot of energy? Not things we're even looking at those ages. So I think sometimes, one step at a time is that very important thing to think about. Let's just take it slow.
Right. And that is often something we do as parents. We're kind of jumping the gun, thinking about long-term consequences. But sometimes it's good to just take a look at, and a professional would do that for you. Take a look at what's going on right now and what are the tools that I could give you to help with this specific problem at this moment in time.
Yes.
I actually had, a family in mind that I saw a couple of years ago. They came from a background where, development wasn't really something that you talked about. It was really hard to admit that the child might need help. And I remember, mom did seek an evaluation. She was very hesitant about it. And I remember she told me that, grandma said that these kind of evaluations go on your permanent record. And it's kind of like going to jail. And that would be something I couldn't get rid of, or there would be a label that I couldn't get rid of. And it was really a big part of that evaluation was to make sure mom understands this is confidential. You could take this developmental assessment and throw it in the garbage as soon as I leave.
For sure.
So I think sometimes like cultural differences get in the way of a parent seeking resources.
Yeah, I definitely think that's things that we see regularly. Even just when you ask about those family history things, it's like, I don't know, they just said I had trouble learning, but nothing was ever done. Or, oh yeah, his mom didn't talk till she was like 4 or 5, but we didn't talk about those things. She talked eventually.
Right.
Those are just things that, years ago, nobody really talked about or addressed. And now, with things shifting and changing around education, things are being more of a concern or brought up more often when we go to a doctor visit, whether it be a pediatrician, whether it be whoever you choose to go see. Yeah, for sure. You are your child's best advocate and you know them the best. So if you decide, you know what, I think that I need more information, just like you would take care of your own health. If I wanted more information about some part of my body, something inside of me, and my internist or general practitioner was like, we did blood work, everything looked good, I'd be like, that's great, but I'm going to go see a cardiologist. I'm going to go see an optometrist. I'm going to go see whoever it is out there that specializes in that part of my body. Well, you know what? And a lot of people I don't think realize this. There are specialists for every type of pediatric part of your child's body too. So if you have a question, if you have a concern, you have the right to go look at any other specialist. And nobody's going to question why you did. They're just going to say, wow, that was great thinking.
Right. And that's where we are meeting parents. I do have questions and I want answers. And sometimes you might get the answer that you were hoping for. Everything's okay. But wouldn't it be great to hear that from somebody who specializes in that versus, your sister, your grandma, the daycare teacher, someone who actually specializes in what you were worried about.
They went to school and studied it all, and they have the expertise to say that.
Right. That's reliable information.
Exactly.
So what do you think is typically new information that we bring to parents or parents report back that is surprising when we talk about self-referral?
I think sometimes self-reflection is sometimes that really unique situation that we're bringing to them. Like, oh, I didn't even realize that's what I was doing each day. You take, for example, that child who they're concerned maybe they're not walking or they're not playing with their toys appropriately and they're putting them all in their mouth. Sometimes if we're like, hey, your child that's not walking, do you have the habit of maybe like you love them so much, you want to cuddle them, and maybe you carry them everywhere? Or maybe they're sitting like in one of those jumperoos, they have so much energy. So sometimes if they don't have a lot of experience on the floor with that free open space to be on their belly or be on their back, be in sitting position, sometimes it's just that overall opportunity is what parents don't realize when they reflect back on what they've been doing. Not that it's a negative, it's just that reflection. That child who's putting a lot of things in their mouth, they're like, well, we have so many toys. And sometimes that little child just needs a little boost to be like, why don't we sit down and show them how this item is used and give them a little, if we drop into their play several times a day and just model for them, suddenly that little bit that we're doing is like, you know what? They are now stacking those Duplo blocks. They are now pressing the button on the item. They're whatever it is with that item they're doing, they suddenly know how to do it and they're seeing less mouthing with the item. So those little bits of self-reflection that, as we all do in our everyday life, we have to self-reflect in whatever we're doing in our daily habits, is very helpful. And I think sometimes just bringing that to everybody's attention, to that parent who's like, I'm here all day or I'm working, and by the time I get home, showing them it's just teeny tiny little changes can make the little difference.
Right. And that's like, I think, a great point where you say, in order to self-diagnose, you also need to have knowledge. And who has more knowledge about your child or those habits at home than you, the parent? So I think when we meet parents, we do have a lot of questions that are very much directed towards certain skills, but it's that added layer of information that they provide us with that really makes us like connect those dots. And sometimes you have the privilege of, doing these assessments in the home, taking a look at the environment, taking a look at like the relationships between the child and who else is in the home. Sometimes you do see them in a more neutral environment, in like a center based in a clinic. But that's really where you rely on the parent to provide all that extra information.
For sure.
And that gives you just a big picture of the child. It's not just whether or not they could stack the block on top of each other, but whether or not there's opportunity, whether or not there's encouragement. Is there an older sibling that takes the blocks every time the child wants to attempt? So I think I agree with you when we talk about new information. The parents are often surprised that they were able to reach all these conclusions on their own. We perhaps guided them on what it is that we're looking for, but most of the time they'll voluntarily provide that information if they're given the platform, right? What are some of the tools? This podcast is meant to be a resource as well. What are some of the tools that we provide parents when it comes to self-referral? Typically, between the ages of birth and 3, if I have questions as a parent, who would I call?
I think that most states do have an early intervention program in them. So you can definitely look that up on, early intervention in my state. And there should be like some sort of 800 number to contact to make your own self-referral, and knowing that no doctor has to recommend that for you. Nobody has to tell you to call. If you have a concern, any concern is valid. And that's, I think, the most important thing. I think people are waiting for somebody to tell them that this is the time to call.
Right.
If they say, wait 5 months, wait 3 months, if your concern is a concern, then it's a concern.
Right.
And that's important to know.
Right. And again, in early intervention is state funded. Every state does have that program. You do have the right to call and ask for a team to come and take a look at your child's development. And again, it is a confidential process. So none of that gets sent to a school. It doesn't get shared with the pediatrician. It doesn't get sent to the daycare teacher, not even to grandma.
I was just about to say, it's not getting sent to the in-laws. You don't even have to tell them you're doing it. If they say, don't worry, they'll grow out of it. Guess what? Maybe when, your husband or your wife was younger, they thought that's fine, but you can choose to do whatever you want.
Right. And it's 100% voluntary. So even if you go through the process, you can decide whether or not you want to seek therapy for your child. Mm-hmm. But early intervention is definitely one resource for this age group. What else is available?
I like a reliable milestone checklist, not just, any old checklist. I'm not a big fan of Dr. Google.
Right.
Don't Google the question and come up with 12 answers because, then you're going to get yourself worried and stay up all night because you're worried about all those things that it said. But the CDC does have a milestone checklist. Don't think that because it says it happens at 14 months, that if it didn't happen, something is wrong. There is room. There is a window there.
I can't tell you how many times I've gone to an evaluation and a parent, came up with their own diagnosis just based on Google.
Yes.
He's not babbling all that much. And I Googled it and it says he might have brain damage.
Yes.
And and I'm really worried. Should I take him to the hospital? So, we absolutely want to
be mindful
of that.
Yes.
It's hard enough to be a parent. It's hard enough to have all the stress of making sure your child is learning and making progress and they're eating and they're growing. So there's definitely an added layer of pressure when we look into unreliable resources.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And another resource that, again, is available in some places is actually if you look into colleges that have this is maybe specific to speech therapy. Colleges that have speech clinics, they are usually run by a speech therapist. But you do have graduate students who are doing the therapy, again, supervised by a licensed speech therapist. But usually those resources are low cost to no cost. You do have a very motivated student that really wants to make sure your child is making progress. So maybe doing a little bit of research on whether or not that's a resource in your area is a great option.
Yeah.
So I did, I went to graduate school. I did work in one of those clinics. Yes. But again, it's going to give you some answers. There is an evaluation process. There is the therapy involved. So that is definitely one of the options in some of the areas.
Yeah, I've definitely heard great feedback from people who've done it in my area, for sure. Another great option is checking with your insurance to see what services are covered under your plan. Again, not something you have to go to your pediatrician about unless, some referral process is needed. But go armed with your information if it is needed. Say, hey, this is my concern. This is what I need, and please help me. Right. But otherwise, go to your insurance, see what's covered, what's not covered, who's in your plan, get a list of people. And you don't have to take the first one on the list, but you can sure meet with them and see who is kind of interesting to you. Get what their play looks like, what their therapy looks like, and if it follows what you're looking for.
Right. And what do you think is unique when we're talking about self-referral with the birth to 3 population? What do you think is a unique part of the conversation when we talk to parents about, or we encourage parents to self-refer?
I think that, we talked a little bit about that self-reflection piece. I think just knowing that brain development is kind of ever changing right now. we can still work with all of that. It's important to know that just because what's going on right now doesn't mean it's going to be the same in 6 months or 8 months.
Right.
Making sure that you're present, you're active, you're involved.
Right.
So those things are going to be ever changing at that point.
Right. There's a window of opportunity.
Yeah.
Between the ages of like birth to 3. Clearly it's never too late, but that window of achieving these milestones is critical. That's when the brain really makes those connections, those neural connections. And children start to acquire these skills that are very much essential for later on, like peer interaction, parent-child bonding, language learning. The list is endless, but there's a reason why we want to intervene during that time period.
Very important.
Much easier to make progress when you're targeting these skills early on. And we know that from adults too, right? It's so hard to change any kind of habit, really. But the earlier you start intervening, changing these habits, the less you have to worry about that down the line. So we do want to make sure that parents have the resources when it's the right time to kind of come in and make these changes, so that later on it's not a concern that you carry with you throughout their learning, throughout the years. And what do you think is, if you have to kind of think of your 25 years of experience, what do you think is something memorable or an experience that perhaps you had when we're talking about self-referral? What comes to mind?
I can definitely think of a couple. And one that pops up about my own child is, he's 15 now. So when I look back on were therapies and early intervention and referrals to specialists a big thing then? It wasn't. It was not something that was handed out easily. It wasn't even something that was really discussed, which seems crazy because it wasn't that long ago.
Right.
I'm talking as though it's 25 years ago when I first started working with kids, but it's only 15.
Right.
And my son was a late walker, very late. He was 17 and a half months. So that's really on the late end of walking.
Right.
But everybody, I'd bring it up to the pediatrician every time we came. He looks like he's getting there. He looks, he's cruising. He's so close. Okay. You take their word at hand at that point because you're kind of like, they're my trusted person.
Right. Especially as a first-time mom.
Yeah.
I mean,
you talk to your people, you talk to, your mom, your mother-in-law. Don't worry. He'll walk into kindergarten. You think, okay, well, they're my mom. They know best.
Right.
Had I had to do it over again and had more of the information, I 1,000% would have followed up with either a specialist. I would have referred to early intervention. I would have taken those extra steps.
Right.
Because there was definitely some lingering things after. Even though he was a late walker, he was so careful with his movements. He was so careful not to fall. He was so careful with his movements. Having gotten into the field, even as he was a little bit later in his elementary years, I spoke with occupational therapists and physical therapists to get information and tips to put in his everyday routine to be like, what can I do with this? He was late to ride a bike because he was always worried about, falling and getting hurt. So I feel like had I maybe, and again, who knows? Had I maybe.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I'll never know that answer.
Right. You always wonder about what you didn't do.
Yeah.
And you never regret what you proactively did.
Exactly. Right. So I think it's made me a super proactive parent now in the sense that if he needs something, I am 6,000% on top of it. I will get him help in anything he needs. I will, fight tooth and nail whoever's not giving him what he needs. And the same could be said for my other son. You want to make sure you're getting your kid your help because you don't want to second guess any of that again.
Interesting. So that experience of perhaps missing the opportunity, then created an enhanced sense of
for sure
providing help. And actually, that makes me think of actually have an opposite experience, with my own son. So, that was maybe about 10 years ago. It was my first child, and I trusted my dear husband to take him to his 18-month well visit. And we actually have a wonderful pediatrician who always he'll make sure that we are heard, and he'll ask whether or not we have concerns. And there is a developmental checklist that the clinic provides. So, at the time, the pediatrician didn't really know what I do for a living. So I sent my husband with my son to his 18-month-old well visit. And the doctor said, "So, does he have any words? Is he talking?" And that's a tricky question for a lot of parents because, when we are thinking about words and talking, we kind of think an adult vocabulary. And my husband, who at that point had no developmental information or maybe any kind of information about kids in general, thought to himself, no, I don't think he's talking. I don't think there are any words. And mind you, at that point, with a speech therapist as a mother, he had animal sounds, he had car sounds, he had word approximations for family members. But, he did not put sentences together. I want cookie, give me the water. And I certainly did not expect him to. So my husband comes home and tells me the pediatrician said that we really need to go and seek an evaluation with a speech therapist. He is behind. He is not talking. And we need to be proactive about it. So, as much as I appreciate the experience, because at the end of the day, the pediatrician did not have time to look into that. Like, okay, what does that mean? Yes. And what is he saying? So I do appreciate the fact that he did refer us.
For sure.
Regardless. I don't appreciate so much, the referral from the husband.
Yes. We need to see a speech therapist. Not you.
Right.
But somebody.
I got to educate you a little bit more. But, that's where I think we're going to kind of bring it all together, that even if we're using the pediatrician as a resource, things can fall between the cracks.
For sure.
Those developmental checklists, again, it's a question and answer. Sometimes there's a lot more to cover that is relevant for your child's development. It is never harmful to just ask the questions and check and go to the right professional and seek answers just so you could sleep better at night and not wonder about that. From your own experience.
Definitely when my kids were 0 to 3, I did not go to a pediatrician appointment or let my husband go without a list of questions. There was a list of questions that got sent at all times if I couldn't go. And even if I went, we would confer about questions. What do we have to ask? Right. What are our questions for this appointment?
Wow, that's great.
Because I needed him to either have clear answers, to tell me what the answer was. Again, I work with children. I need to know what these answers are. I don't want him being like getting there. Do you have any questions? No.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
To come prepared. That's a great tip.
And I think that's helpful for parents to know out there, just like you said, know that sounds and approximations and answering what sound does a dog make is helpful to know, to tell when the doctor says, does your child have any words? Well, when they see their water, they say wah wah. When they see their bottle, they say baba. When they see dad, they say dada. Those are helpful things to say instead of no, they don't say anything.
Right. Right.
Because there's a really large window between those he doesn't say anything. And every time he sees a car, he says beep, beep. And when he sees the train, he says choo, choo.
Right.
There's a really big gap between those two things.
Right. And we're forgetting that, kids, they don't come with that little manual that we all wish somebody put together for us.
Yes.
And, as a first-time parent, or if you haven't been around kids most of your life, you're not going to know what are the expectations and what are the milestones. So a lot of resources are free, and they are there for you to just look into. Mm-hmm. And again, if we are talking about greater concerns, these professionals are there to guide you and help you and answer these questions. And how lucky are we to even have that available, right?
And I think finding the reliable resources is the key there. When you do go and search some of these questions, making sure that you're handpicking the reliable ones, not like, Billy from Idaho said, this is what he noticed from his kid.
Right.
Less reliable.
Right.
We want to find more medical background ones, more reliable journal kind of things. Not like Dr.
CDC,
Google answers.
That's a reliable
CDC,
resource.
More reliable resources. Not like, well, I was Googling what I thought I knew, and this is really what I found. That's enough to make any person worried and frantic and crazy. Because if you're Googling it, there's probably hundreds of thousands of people Googling the same thing.
Right.
And those answers are being compiled to equal the same thing.
Right. Something detrimental.
Yes.
That's absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
So if we had to kind of leave everyone with one powerful message, is that self-referral is available for everyone. And there are resources out there. You don't know what you don't know. So hopefully this podcast made a difference. And then, just talking to other parents, talking to teachers, talking to pediatricians could kind of facilitate that kind of discussion and give you the tools that you need, right? So that's all we have for you for today. I really want to thank Emily for being a great companion and sharing so much.
It was my pleasure today.
Oh, thank you. And if you liked the content and if you are curious about what else we have for you, then definitely make sure to like or subscribe or comment. And of course, this is a new project and we would love to have some feedback. So thank you, everyone, and see you next time.